ультиматум в цей момент. Росія напала на Україну, і ми не могли нічого обрати, окрім того, щоб взяти зброю і захищатись. І там не було жодної дипломатії, тому що Росія напала на Україну вночі, і українці взяли зброю і почали боронити свою державу без допомоги жодної країн світу. Так воно було. Ніхто Україні в цей момент не допомагав. А потім, коли всі побачили, що Путін не зможе захопити нашу державу, що нікуди не дінеться наш народ, наші військові, що нікуди не побіг президент України, і тоді всі зрозуміли, що треба допомогти Україні. І тільки тоді почалась та чи інша допомога в різних обсягах різних країн. Росія поставила ультиматум в цей момент. Росія напала на
That's what President Zelensky was saying, is that at that moment, if they would not accept an ultimatum from Russia at their darkest hour, why would they accept one now? 3 years later, when they are fighting to a standstill the Russian army. Zelensky also warned that an ill-considered end to the war in Ukraine could lead to an Afghan-style scenario with no agreements between the U.S. and Russia without Ukraine having any effect on Ukraine, who would continue to fight even without the support of the United States. Because, again, at their darkest hour, if they would not accept this the ultimatum, why would they accept it now? Because they have more to do and more to say. This is basically, the ultimatum basically comes down to weakening Ukraine's military, recognizing the occupied lands as Russian, and installing a pro-Kremlin government. In fact, one of the things that's come out of the negotiations in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, was this idea that Trump said that there has to be a ceasefire, then there has to be elections in Ukraine, and then you can have an actual peace after that, an actual agreement that will stick, which is basically the Kremlin talking points. It's literally what the Kremlin wants. They want the opportunity to mess with the Ukrainian government, to put in either their own stooges or somebody who's more pliant than Zelensky, so they can get what they want, namely a neutered Ukraine that's easy to take over and easy for them to deal with. But Ukrainians know that peace under Russian control and domination is worse than war. Stalin alone killed 4 million Ukrainians in the 1930s, and that is just one example. Ukraine wants to be aligned with the West. They want the freedoms that they can get by being part of the West. They share our values. They want free markets and the rule of law. As Representative Don Bacon states, they deserve that right. And Zelensky then came out and said there are three main principles to a fair peace. There must be an exchange of prisoners, a strong Ukrainian army, and the presence of a foreign contingent in Ukraine remain. And the Ukraine does not legally recognize the occupied territories as part of Russia. That's pretty straightforward. That's three pretty straightforward items that are very much doable. In fact, more doable than most anything of the more robust things that really need to happen. But they are the basics. By the way, this is probably one of the hardest live streams to prepare for today, and that's because with the chaos in our relation, in the negotiations, in the statements by President Trump, the hot and cold disinformation emerging from the lips of American leadership here. It really truly looks like the U.S. is abandoning Ukraine. I usually try and look for a silver lining, some kind of a positive that I can come out with on this. And right now, that's really difficult. But in the end, I am hopeful. I always remain hopeful. Yes, it was hard to prepare for this one, but prepare I did. And today's going to be a little bit shorter than normal because mainly what we're going to be focusing on is those negotiations in Riyadh. We have a few other things beyond that to talk about that are interesting. But, and to be honest, that has just ended and we're just getting information out of there. The Russian propagandists have already gotten really animated about what they're excited about what's coming out of Riyadh. Why not create a military coalition between Russia and America and divide Europe? Take Europe and split it between us. We can take all of their stuff. Who needs it? Who needs Europe? They think it's a great idea. They'll set up their bases without a hitch at the usual points: Berlin, Paris. That's not dividing Europe. That's giving it to Russia. And let me ask you this: do you really think that? Do we really think that this is a good idea? No, we don't. But everything is transactional, and so I'm going to briefly, in fact, while I'm thinking about it here, the last time we did a live stream, which was just a few days ago, there was talk about this mineral deal, this rare earth mineral deal that might be a great way for Ukraine to, work with the U.S., become economically tied with the U.S., and therefore give the U.S. some reason to want to fight for Ukraine specifically from an economic perspective. Well, that deal turned out to be nothing more than, hey, we've already provided you all this stuff. I want $500 billion worth of your rare earth minerals straight up right now. Just to fork over the rights to them and all the whole 9 yards. I'm not going to give you anything. This is not an economic partnership. This is me strip mining Ukraine. That is what the initial mineral deal turned out to be. Is the U.S. saying $500 billion worth of rare earth minerals. That'll pay for what you've already received. Number one, the U.S. has not sent $500 billion worth of anything to Ukraine, period. Total support is around between 100 and 118 billion. Most of that is in the form of old U.S. hardware that was ready to be retired anyway or removed from service, not current production material that was rolled off the assembly line. That was the materials deal, the rare earth minerals deal, and that's just wrong. If you looked at it from the perspective of GDP, that was more punitive than Germany got after World War I with their Versailles treaty there. The one that resulted in Germany turning into Nazi Germany for World War II because it was so onerous, so over the top in punishing a nation. And Ukraine is not the one that invaded another country. Ukraine is the one who was invaded. Why, in heaven's name, would they say yes to effectively being punished worse than Germany was after World War I for something that they did not trigger and they did not do? It was dumb. Anyway, so that's the materials deal that was talked about before. Initially, though, this meeting in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, the crown prince there said, let's bring Zelensky over. Let's have him present at these negotiations. And the U.S. and the Russians said, no. Now, why would they say no to that? The only reason I can think of is that they're planning to divide the spoils, not come up with a peace negotiation. But there are some things that came out of it, so let's keep on going. They actually, the U.S. proposed that there be a moratorium on attacks on energy facilities. And the Russians, of course, said, we've never, ever attacked any energy facilities. No, sir, not a one. That is just the rawest propaganda that we have never, ever, ever attacked energy facilities, except those that were directly tied to military activities. Of course, at the same time they were saying this, they attacked Odessa with a swarm of drones, and destroyed a power substation, knocking power out in the city. Yes, of course, nothing that Russia has ever done has been to attack civilians, such as a children's hospital or other medical facilities or dams or electrical facilities or power facilities or destroying entire towns. This is Russia's pattern. If they can't get you to voluntarily come to their side, they lay waste to everything. And the fact that we are negotiating with these people as though we can do some kind of a reset absolutely toasts my cookies. Oh, resets have been tried with Russia multiple times. Don't get me wrong. There's been more attempts at resets with Russia than you can shake a stick at. After the fall of the Soviet Union, we sent food aid, we sent money, we sent help, we sent everything to prevent them from falling apart at the seams. And we got no credit for that. We helped them at World War II after, I might add, they stopped trying to support Nazi Germany because Nazi Germany invaded them as well, despite their pact where they were going to divide up Europe. Sound familiar? I might be a little animated today, so I do apologize. We have sent aid every time they've been on the ropes. The U.S. has sent money and food. You know, for trying to defeat our enemy. We sure do a crappy job of it. But anyway, so Russia's immediately destroyed some energy infrastructure that was intended for civilians. But they say they came out with 4 main principles during their talks to reestablish the proper functioning of diplomatic missions in Washington and Moscow. Bad idea. A high-level team is to be appointed to negotiate and work through the end of the war in Ukraine to reach an agreement that is enduring and acceptable to all parties. About the only thing that looks like it's even vaguely positive. Consider geopolitical and economic cooperation that could result from an end to the conflict in Ukraine. This sounds exactly like food aid and economic aid right after the fall of the Soviet Union. Yet again, it sounds like the Hillary Clinton reset. It sounds like all the things we've tried in the past, but, just like socialism, we never did it just right. The representatives at the meeting, including Rubio and everyone else, are supposed to stay engaged in this process to ensure it is productive. Again, this is the meeting in Saudi Arabia. Trump did state he was open to sending peacekeepers to Ukraine. He also praised the talks in Riyadh and said his confidence in resolving the war has increased, and said he was disappointed in Ukraine's stance, stating that Zelensky should have never let this happen. Blaming the victim. But there is also word that we may have the U.S. companies returning to Russia's energy sector, the ones that got nationalized when this war broke out because Russia was ticked off about everything. They're hoping this will happen because it'll help rebuild Russia again. The Russians said that things went not badly, with them stating that they agreed to promote bilateral relations and respect each other's interests as it goes. This is what that meeting looked like. This is the people that were involved. The U.S. sent the junior varsity team. The Russians sent their Olympic team as far as the negotiations go. And it did not go to the U.S.'s benefit. The main purposes of the Russia-U.S. negotiations are to intertwine Russia and American financial interests in business deals with the removal of sanctions and enduring U.S. security guarantees for Putin's family's personal safety and their assets, even beyond Putin's lifetime. This is not a surprise. Or as Michael Weiss said, I think we can stop calling it a negotiation. This is a wholesale adoption of the Russian position. He even blames Ukraine for starting the war. Trump even said that he doesn't see Russia as a threat to NATO and Europe, and doubts that it intends to attack any alliance country. Funny, that would be really useful for Ukraine right about now, to be part of an alliance that would prevent Russia from attacking it. No, because of the further things we've been seeing coming out of this is this concept that the U.S. might actually pull its troops entirely from um, from Europe. That's part of the things that have been talked about, of things that might be on the table for these negotiations. Um, I don't know. It just feels like this is capitulation. The European member of the European Parliament stated that the intentions by Trump's team were to have three stages. I mentioned them earlier: a ceasefire, elections in Ukraine, and a final agreement. This is basically entirely what Putin wants. Ukraine must become a demilitarized and neutral state that does not belong to any blocs or alliances, meaning that basically Ukraine has no sovereign independence. They can't belong to a bloc or alliance. That means that nobody can come to their aid when Russia inevitably attacks again. If Europe wants to promote peace in Ukraine, it needs to stop supplying weapons to Kyiv, according to Alexander Grushko, the deputy foreign minister of Russia. But if you really look at the numbers, this is where things start getting interesting. Europe has provided more direct assistance, total allocated aid and aid to be allocated, than the U.S. by a large margin, nearly double. Now, the amount delivered so far is almost on par, but the Europeans have been providing more than the U.S. and have for some time. European officials also believe that Trump is likely to agree to withdraw U.S. troops from the Baltics and perhaps further west, leaving the European Union vulnerable to a Russian army that NATO governments warn is preparing for a larger conflict beyond Ukraine. The Europeans even had a summit, a security summit, without the U.S. being involved, gathering together leaders from across the European Union. The initial one was smaller, and the later one included some of those in the Baltics. They are discussing what the future looks like without U.S. involvement in Europe. Today in Paris, we reaffirmed that Ukraine deserves peace through strength. In other words, more Reagan. President von der Leyen even stressed that the European Union is carrying its full share of military assistance to Ukraine and stands ready to do even more. This is during a meeting with General Keith Kellogg, who is the U.S. envoy to Ukraine. The long story short on this is that there's been a lot of discussion about Kellogg being in the area, but it seems that Kellogg really has no power. It appears that he is being sidelined in just about every respect to these negotiations. This isn't just about the front line in Ukraine. It's the front line of Europe and the United Kingdom. It's about our national security. And I think we need to do more. We need to step up, according to Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The Ukrainians have a little bit less, shall we say, less rosy view of the situation. There will be no ceasefire anytime soon. There is none on the horizon. The game hasn't even started yet. We are all just warming up on the field. We need to draw Trump into a long game instead of agreeing to his quick pressure. The U.S. believes that something like Minsk III is the only realistic scenario. And this is from the former foreign minister, Dmytro Kuleba. This is just, they're seeing this as being Trump wants a sudden, fast, easy end to this. And the problem with easy solutions is that they leave the hard things unresolved. An easy solution so that Trump can say, I created peace. Peace in our time. They're Chamberlains, not Churchills. But he says that Putin still hopes to outplay the West and persuade it to make a decision that's acceptable to Putin. That is why he believes Ukraine's strategy should be to draw the Trump administration into the longer term game. There is so much more to be gained by appropriately defending and helping Ukraine with their sovereignty and their independence than there would ever be to ally with Russia, because Russia lies. They lied about not attacking power infrastructure. They lied about not attacking a children's hospital. They lied about everything. I already talked. Mr. Rubio has been a bit of a challenge for me lately. He has said that they've agreed to their embassies going back to normal staffing and possible later cooperation and economic ties. The Institute for the Study of War put it like this: the Kremlin reiterated its demands that Ukraine cede additional territory in eastern and southern Ukraine to Russia and disband the Ukrainian military in the future, while continuing to message that the Kremlin is unwilling to make territorial concessions itself in any future peace negotiations. Translation: Russia thinks they can get everything they want. And the way things are going right now, that may be true. At least if the U.S. gets its way with the current administration. Europe, maybe not so much, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes here. Putin still aims to occupy all of Ukraine. He's just imitating a negotiation process. He is confident in victory and believes he can wear down Ukraine and Europe. Putin thinks he is winning. The losses of his army on the front do not pressure him to stop fighting. This is from NBC News. They state further that he has no real interest in a peace deal and that he will ultimately win the war. And to be honest, if the U.S. pulls out, Europe's going to have to step up. The question is, will they? On the news of these agreements coming together as they are, U.S. defense stocks fell hard in trading, dropping off between 16 and 3%. Whereas European defense stocks skyrocketed, with Rheinmetall pulling in 36.4% gains in their stocks. Thales in France, 22.66. BAE Systems up 10, and Airbus, up 5. So lots of things going on. Now, this could also be, these falls on the U.S. defense stocks could be due to cuts being prepared in the United States, but with the rise in European defense stocks, there could be a lot more going on in the background. And in the end, I'm going to just touch on this for a moment here. Europe standing up and defending Ukraine with their resources. Understand that Europe has a GDP, combined GDP that's smaller than the U.S., but they have 550 million people. They have the potential for a great deal of industry. They have employment issues. They could absolutely stand to stand up some defense industries and expand in those areas. They could, if the U.S. steps out with a deal so bad, Europe may in fact have to step up. And they think they should have been stepping up 3 years ago. They need to expand their defense industrial base. They need to make certain that they're prepared. If they are truly scared of a Putin controlling Europe, they need to step up. And they need to step up yesterday. And we're starting to see those signs. Will they? Won't they? Let me tell you something, though, because Donald Trump wants this to happen fast, because if it doesn't happen fast, then Europe will be able to stand up. And the U.S. will lose its position of power. Rubio said that the end result is they want to end the war in Ukraine with the consent of all parties, including Europe, including Ukraine, and the conditions must be acceptable. This may take a long time. Out of all the statements he made, this is probably the only one that is actually close to the truth. They say they want to end the war in Ukraine fairly and prevent its resumption in 2 to 3 years. And the EU has to be at the negotiating table at some point, since it imposed sanctions against the Russian Federation. But the problem is, if you're negotiating, that means people have to be willing to make sacrifices. There has to be some balance. Right now, Russia is reiterating their maximalist talking points. Now, there is something interesting going on out of Turkey. Erdogan and Zelensky had a meeting, and afterwards, Erdogan released a statement saying that no, there is no acceptable compromise here that does not return all of Ukraine's sovereign territory back to Ukraine. Crimea, all of the eastern part, all of it. This is interesting coming from Erdogan. I do believe that Turkey is trying to become a significant regional power. Again, a lot of their work happened in Syria, and we can see that it was very successful. So right now, Erdogan is riding high as a power broker in the region. And it's likely he wants to keep this going. The thing is, he also sees that Russia is no ally in a lot of ways. And he knows what happened the last time Russia took over most of the Black Sea region, namely that Turkey all got them short into that particular stick. So he doesn't want to see Russia in control of the Black Sea. He most assuredly doesn't want them in control of the territories that are close to him at all. So he's definitely motivated in this regard. So these statements by Turkey are really interesting. They are even saying they're ready to play any role to promote peace in Ukraine and reconstruction of the country. However, they do not rule out the acceptance of unpleasant decisions regarding territories. So we've got a little bit of a mixed bag coming out of Turkey on that regard, but we've got mixed bags coming out of the U.S. And so things are in upheaval in the simplest way to state it. By the way, absolutely pipe in. Let me know if you have any good news you want to share. I haven't seen any comments just yet, but please do. I could use a little bit of something extra special to keep me upbeat today. Interesting little video here. I'm going to go ahead and play it. Let me go ahead and get myself set here. And a boom. And
my name is Ollie Todd. I work in Task Force Kindred, and I'd like to introduce to you the Gravehawk air defense system, which has been developed to support Ukraine. The 20-foot container includes a dual launcher for the A-11 R-73, a former Soviet air-to-air missile, now under the control of Ukrainian armed forces. They sit atop a launcher from a Su-27 or MiG-29, a bespoke platform which can be raised and lowered into position, ready for firing. As you can see, above us is a crane to enable to move these missiles, which weigh over 100 kilos, into position. The Gravehawk launcher system that we have created will use the air-to-air missile in a ground-based role. It's primarily designed to take out Russian drones, but will also take out other threats such as aircraft, helicopters, and also potentially cruise missiles. The A-11 missile, as you can see, it's an IR heat-seeking missile, and it's a very powerful and effective missile that can get up to quite a significant range quickly. The A-11 is in the Ukrainian stocks in large numbers, and therefore it's one of these capabilities which Ukraine will be able to sustain. The tracking system uses a very effective camera. It has both a thermal and normal optical sight and can identify targets well beyond the range of the actual missile itself. And then it passes that information to the missile that can then continue to track separately, while it then switches and focuses on a different target. In practice, the system here would be far away from the container itself, perhaps in a camouflage or concealed location to protect the operators. The system, we think, can be operated by a fairly small team, less than 5 people. The reload is by hand and would be a 2-person lift to put new missiles into the system. We've transferred 2 systems to Ukraine already, and we're in the process of developing and delivering a further 15 systems, which we hope will be in Ukraine over the next year. We hope that this will be a very successful system, which will be particularly effective to protect Ukrainian critical national infrastructure against the constant threat of drones and missile attack from Russia.
I found that really fascinating myself. The Grave Hawk system utilizes Soviet missiles that Ukraine has in large stockpiles. They just don't have very many ways to launch them at this point in time. So they've got these air-to-air missiles. This system will allow them to be used in the ground-to-air role. Really tremendous creativity. And now Russia, if they want to destroy all the air defense systems, basically has to find every shipping container in Ukraine and blow it up in order to be sure they got them all. Interesting, to say the least. Very good information out of the UK. Over in Odessa, I mentioned this briefly earlier. There was an attack on a power substation. There was also damage to a hospital in a Shahid attack. And finally, we're going to talk about Zaluzhny for just a moment here. I don't remember if this is in English. Let me pop this.
Збройні сили України не мають, скажімо так, бути збройними силами України.
No, it's not in English. I would play it for you if it was in English, but yeah, we're not going there. But basically, he says that there are 4 key conditions for victory: a prepared mobilization reserve for a prolonged war, consistent international support, competent military leadership, and effective management of the entire process. Really, Zaluzhny has been a tremendous asset to Ukraine, and as a diplomat now, he's even being effective over in the UK. I suspect he's being groomed to take on a leadership role back in Ukraine, perhaps once this war is over, maybe in a run for the presidency, because it looks like Zelensky's pretty darn tired, and he's had to deal with a lot of things for a long time. Zaluzhny may be the best person for taking that role once again. This gives him a little bit of polish and a little bit of political know-how. Interesting to see. Now let's go ahead and talk about Russia for just a moment here. Only got a few items here. We already mentioned that that the Russians had said that Ukraine needs to be demilitarized, but they're also stating that Ukraine has irrevocably lost Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk, and Kherson and Zaporizhia. In other words, area that Russia has not even stood a chance of capturing. An interesting little bit. Apparently, 8 Russians went blind because people put explosives in their FPV goggles. This is recorded in early February in the Kursk region, and they were actually dismantled some to find the explosives that you can see right there. Clearly, Ukraine has managed to get in the middle of Russia's supply chain. On the other hand, Russia's begun production of more powerful drones, including the Shahid 238 with a turbojet engine that can reach up to 550 kilometers per hour and a flight range of 2,500 kilometers. This is not good news for Ukraine, but not unexpected either. A lot of things, what I'm seeing is indications that Russia has managed to readjust their supply chains to avoid more Western hardware. They use Chinese production facilities. They use Belarusian assets, North Korean. They're gradually finding ways around Western hardware through either redesign or repackaging to be able to still produce their weapons and equipment. Ukraine, however, returned the favor by destroying an oil pumping station, which now is down offline for 2 months. This included damage to turbines, transformers, and fire suppression system, and a 30% reduction in oil pumping during repairs. So one more way of reducing Russia's financial inputs. The Syzran oil refinery was also struck by drones at 900 kilometers away in Samara. This accounts for 2.6% of Russia's total capacity, or 170,000 barrels per day. And the Kropotkin oil pumping station, which was blown up by Ukrainian drones, stopped the oil flow to the Russian port on the Black Sea, which is part of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, again preventing more Russian assets from getting through. Let's go ahead and move on to the international front. And as I mentioned today, this is a bit of a shorter one because, I managed to get it a little bit sooner, of course, but it's just been the amount of actual news beyond the Riyadh process has been minimal. So let's continue on. Estonia's Foreign Intelligence Service reports that Russia is expanding its armed forces in a way that not only supports Russia's war effort in Ukraine, but also prepares for a potential future war with NATO. And the interesting thing here is that, once again, by slow walking aid, we've allowed Russia to find ways around the Western sanctions. This allows them to bring their equipment up and begin manufacturing again, often with modified or reduced capabilities, but in volumes that would allow them to carry out other military actions. There is indications that they are rearming their units in the on the actual NATO border again. There's indications that they are preparing a large number of troops to go into Belarus for a potential action there within the next few months to a year and a half. By slow walking this aid, they've allowed Russia to once again begin to rebuild. Now, this is where we get into the stuff that I'm going to absolutely state as speculation. The German foreign minister did state that they have a new financial package for security in Europe, a large package that has never been seen on this scale before. Now, some sources are claiming the 700 billion euro number. This is coming from a couple of sources, actually, including from various news sources, calling it a package of unprecedented scale. Others are a little bit more reserved, with likely being that Europe will announce around $100 billion per year in support. Now, $100 billion per year, or 100 billion euros, roughly, in the same ballpark. If you promise that over 7 years, that's a lot of money. That's $700 billion. The question is, can they run that up a lot faster than that? Because they're going to need to. And other sources are just saying basically the initial value is going to be 6 billion euros. So we got anywhere from 6 billion euros to 700 billion euros. The 700 billion number is probably for European security as a whole, and maybe something over a staged number of years. I don't have good details on this, but they are talking about a large donation from the European Union, from existing European stocks of artillery shells, air defense equipment, and other equipment. Interestingly, Russia has been using, in fact, as Greenpeace, who I trust about as far as I can throw one of these Russian icebreakers, have been using their fleet of nuclear-powered icebreakers to basically work around sanctions by bringing the oil to European ports. So interesting to see, and if nothing else, this at least gets around the pipelines, etc. I mentioned that there was a summit of European leaders who talked about things, but there's another one gathered as of, let me see, it should be gathering today. A wider group of European countries, including Norway, Canada, which is not European, but interesting, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Czechia, and Greece, etc. A tanker transporting Russian oil had 2 explosions happen to it near the Italian city of Savona. The cause of the explosions was unknown, but there were theories based on the nature of the damage they saw to the ship that there was actually explosive devices used on it. This could be levels of sabotage that we've not seen in a long time, to actually have it be obviously explosive. So I'm going to have to watch the schedule and see what actually comes out of it. I mentioned this earlier that Erdogan was making some interesting statements. This is more of the information on that, where Turkey supports the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and independence of Ukraine. At the same time, I emphasize that we will provide all support to conclude the negotiations with the establishment of sustainable peace. 20 Italian institutions found their websites being hacked by a pro-Russian hacker group, and they claim it's for the speech of Italian President Sergio Mattarella, in which he compared Russia and its war in Ukraine to the Third Reich before World War II. The parallels are astounding. I mean, look at it. If you look at the parallels with World War II, it's absolutely nuts how similar things are. And yeah, and there was a drone attack on Khmeimim Air Base in Syria, where Russian troops are stationed, with no official confirmation. The Russians claim it could be a group linked to the new Syrian authorities, and this would be the first known attack on Russian military objects in Syria. Interesting to see, and I'll be interested to see what comes out of this in the long run. China, interestingly enough, both between Donald Trump and Russia have been calling for Chinese peacekeepers to be involved in any peacekeeping mission in Ukraine. Chinese military experts said that China could even have some roles in ending this war, including post-war reconstruction and sending peacemaking troops to Ukraine and providing a collective security guarantee to Ukraine. Considering China has been supporting Russia through this, that's kind of a mafia boss type attitude. But then again, we're getting used to that these days. Andrei Yarmak from Ukraine stated that Russia is using Belarusian-made components for their Kh-69 missiles. These are just the interesting part is that they're now using these Belarusian components. How Belarus is specifically standing up the industry to be able to provide those components, we don't know. But again, they're evading sanctions in creative and different ways. France's foreign minister says the issue of sending Western troops to Ukraine will be considered only after a peace agreement is reached. This is the type of thing where people are calling their shots in advance, which means that those are not going to be on the table for negotiations and can't be used as a stick to bring Russia to the table. Now that Russia is out of Syria, there is reportedly a Russian Panzer S-1 mobile air defense system being sent to the United States for inspection and evaluation. These are the systems that protect the Defense Ministry headquarters in Moscow. So there could be some interesting, shall we say, opportunities for the U.S. to get some intelligence there. And finally, Americans' opinions of Russia hit a post-Russia USSR low, with only 8% now having a favorable view, according to a new Gallup poll. But we are watching in live, basically live in real life, as people are trying to rehabilitate the view of Russia to turn them into an ally. And I'm gonna, after looking at all this stuff, I have, and all the things going on, I'm gonna put it like this. Apparently, the U.S. believes that by alienating and annoying Canada, Europe, Britain, Panama, Mexico, some countries in the Middle East, Africa, Asia, Pacific region, Japan, Taiwan, that we can replace them with Russia. And some people are saying this is 4D chess to try and peel Russia away from China. But to be honest, Russia isn't the senior member of that partnership now. They provide resources to China. That's it. My heater's going, getting a little bit low on gas here. I can hear it. Anyway, it seems like we are throwing away old alliances, old relationships, ones that have been to our mutual benefit for decades. Things that, yeah, there were some issues, but could have been fixed. We're throwing that away in favor of a country that we could buy the GDP of in petty cash. All right, so let's take a look at the front lines. The long story short is there's been no significant changes for days now. Things have been pretty well holding steady in the Kursk region. No changes over in Kharkiv for a very long time. There might have been, let me see, go back a day or two here. Little changes over here near Novomilsk, where the Russians have taken just a touch of open territory there. I didn't remember there being any in this region. A little change near Bilahorivka here. Looks like it's just opening the gray area a bit. Usually that means the Russians are on the move in the area. Good to see. Let's see. Chasov Yar, this is 3 days ago. You can see there's been no change in this area for some time. This was an area of regular advances for some time as well, showing that Russia is being held back. Toretsk, another very active area, no changes at all. But if we come down here near Baranivka, where the Ukrainians have managed to retake some territory, look at this. Basically just a slight redraw of the lines of the gray area, not even the actual lines of control. This is showing that Russia can be held back, can be stopped. They did do a little bit of an advance here near Srebny. But again, this is open territory here. Capturing this open territory is, for lack of a better way to say it, easy. The real area they've been making some progress is here near Dachny. But I've heard mixed reports on what's going over here near Yulakli. And so I don't know exactly what to believe here. There's been some indications that the Ukrainians have been actually fighting Russia back here, but I'm not seeing that reflected in the maps, which makes me wonder if they're pulling out. The people have talked about this area in Dachny and have said the wise military thing to do would be to pull out. And are they? I don't know. This area is confusing right now just because of the variety of things being said about it. A little bit of changes near Velika Novosilka, a little bit of open territory being captured by Russia. And that is kind of the long story short. No major changes in sometimes small tidbits. We're seeing that Russia is taking weeks to now gather together assault groups now. It's an indication that they're really kind of at the end of their rope in many ways in Ukraine. So we'll be watching that as well. Let me see if I can find the War Gonzo report here. They say no significant changes in Zaporizhia. They do mention the areas I talked about in here as being as continuing to develop and tactical successes. Chasov Yar with fighting continues in Chasov Yar. But again, I'm not seeing the changes myself. Kursk region, they just says they're putting pressure on the defense of the Ukrainian armed forces. And no changes. I mean, honestly, it just kind of generally matches what I just spoke about. Now, the Ukraine control map, on the other hand, said they're focused on Bakhmut area, where Russian forces continue to, quote, go nowhere fast. But they do report that they entered Novochertuvate, there we go, north of Velika Novosilka, across the Mokry Yali River. So basically matching what we've seen elsewhere. Russians have even gone so far as to start putting nets over their most commonly driven terrain. You can see this little net arrangement here over this road. They're using fishing nets to cover the roads to try and prevent the drones from getting through. The thing is that if they're tied into a small corridor like this, breaching it and then attacking into it becomes trivially easy, as your opponents are effectively channeled into this very tight corridor. No report says no significant map updates. That kind of matches what we've been saying. In the last 3 weeks, according to Tindar, Russians took not more than 23 square kilometers, or around 1 square kilometer per day. That is the minuscule advances compared to what they were doing. Russian bloggers reported that Ukrainian drones dominate the skies of Pokrovsk, and Russian vehicles are getting methodically destroyed and cannot be effectively used. And to the extent that Russian human material, in other words, their soldiers, needs to be disembarked at spots more than 10 kilometers from the front line and then walk on foot after that point. And we'll end with this this short video from the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, as I recall. I'm going to mute this because the song may be copyrighted. I don't know, but this artillery. Now this is probably just composite material here. They took out an enemy tank with a single shot of artillery, stopping an assault near Kreminna. A lot of precision and power being used there. So good work for the Ukrainians in that regard. And on that note, that's pretty much everything for today. I did not have time to put together some interesting extras. There's a lot of reason to be pessimistic right now. But in the end, I still remain cautiously optimistic. It's just today's like today. It's a lot tougher to keep that optimism going. I hope and I pray that a just, sustainable peace will be brought to Ukraine. And to a certain extent, I think it's going to happen in spite of the U.S., not because of it. But we'll see. We'll see. Thank you for joining me today. I'm sorry I didn't see anybody's comments, but I do appreciate you being here. I see that the few people have been here. You guys would love to have you comment when you guys get an opportunity. You have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next video.